What is up, Magic players? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper review video. You know what that means. We got Mayo, aka Josh, co-starring today. What is up, Josh? How are we?
Yo, that's me. He let me out.
Fresh off the plane from Vegas. But that is not today's video. We will keep that for the Vegas recap coming to you shortly. But without much further ado, we're going to jump right in because we do have some cards to talk about from Foundations and Jumpstart 2025. We got double set drop coming, also known as, what is it, the Foundations Jumpstart? Yep. Lots of cards coming into Standard, the Pauper format, the Cube format. Tons of cards being dropped right now, so lots to talk about, but we're going to kick things right off here with some honorable mentions. So for those of you that don't know, Jumpstart and Pauper Foundations, God, if only, Magic Foundations is the new core set replacement, and it will be in rotation for standard legal formats for 5 years. So welcome to the future. This is what Magic and Standard is going to utilize to kind of shape its core archetypes for each standard format in 5-year increments. There are not a ton of notable cards, which I suppose is probably a good thing. This is going to be the basis of Standard. We don't want it to define Standard. We just want it to kind of help it along, similar to how Hearthstone did like the classic or core set back in the day upon release. Without any further ado, we're going to jump into our first honorable mention. This is a red card from J25, also known as Foundations Jumpstart. I'm going to refer to it as J25. This is Scholar of Combustion. This is a 3/2 human wizard for 4. This is 3 in a red. And when it enters, you exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. You may cast that card until the end of your next turn. You still play its costs, and timing rules still apply. A lot of people are excited to see this card. Me, not so much, so I will hand it off to one of the people who will speak positively about this card. I don't think this card, for the record, is better than Ardent Elementalist. I think the timing restriction this imposes is 100% not worth the +1/+1 in power and toughness that you gain. I think this is strictly worse, but Josh, you're pretty excited about this card, so talk to us about it. What is it that you think this card is going to give Pauper Constructed? Where are you going with this?
Personally, I like the fact that it just has the 3/2, right? The power toughness bump is what I'm mostly excited about, and being able to use that to push that forward to win the game, because I don't think the 2/1's ever going to close out a game for you. But Scholar of Combustion has the opportunity to do that. That's pretty much my whole spiel on this one. Like, yes, it exiles the card from your graveyard. You can cast that card until the end of your next turn. It'll then go back to your graveyard. So there's really hardly a functional difference in the ability, except for when the card is exiled, and it's in that limbo of when you can cast it. Anything else you have that would see a card in your graveyard doesn't see that card specifically, so it doesn't give it a flashback. So like Snapcaster Mage, this is not. But I mean, admittedly, if I'm paying for this card, I am going to be trying to hit a 1-drop that I can cast in the same turn. Probably a Lightning Bolt or a Chain Lightning. Something to either clear the way or put more damage to the face. And I don't see the timing restriction being a big deal in those situations.
I think if this card was aggro coded, like, let's just kind of theorycraft, if this card had haste, or maybe even menace, something like that, I would be 100% on board with this being an aggro coded card and it playing into those more proactive cast strategies. As it is, and how Elementalist and Archaeomancer and those type of effects have always been played historically in Pauper, it is very much a reactive value engine, loopy type of strategy where you're getting back a value generation tool from the graveyard and you want to be reactive, you want to save your creatures, you want to cash them in at the appropriate times and or timings to get what you need, i.e. like ephemerating an Archaeomancer to get a counterspell against a crucial spell, or flickering your Archaeomancer in response to a kill spell, those type of things. I think that bringing it back to your hand is a substantial upside in those instances, mostly because if you allow your opponent the opportunity to play around your cast window, they're going to do so, right? If you declare to your opponent, hey, if I don't recast this spell this turn, I have to do it next spell or I get no value, or if I have to do it next turn or I get no value, right? They're going to know what your plan is. So they're going to, at least if available, play into it or play around it. And especially in the control matchups where those value engines are especially important, if you give them information like I'm going to cast, this flicker spell next turn, or I now have a cast down that I can only cast next turn, they're just not going to play into it. They're going to wait for you and then be reactive themselves to generate an advantage on their part, and you just don't have that problem with Elementalist. So I don't see it. If anything, I expect this to be like Elementalist number 5 in some decks that already run Elementalist, but I would be very surprised if this card makes some sort of an aggro showing possible. I just don't think anyone who's playing red and wants to be aggressive is ever playing a 4-drop to get a spell back from their graveyard instead of just running 1-drops and bushwhackers and burn spells and things like that are going to be way better at a proactive strategy like that. But that being said, we'll kind of see where this settles. To be honest, I'm a little bit curious. I could be hard wrong here. And maybe there is very little functional difference between exiling and putting it in your hand. And the timeline restriction makes, no real impact on gameplay. And then this is just a smooth upgrade to Elementalist at 3-2 over 2-1. That remains to be seen. I'm a little skeptical, but we shall see. Moving on is a card that is very aggro-coded and that I am a pretty big proponent of. This is Slimy Piper. This is a 2-1 for 2. It's a green and a colorless. It's a fungus bard. And whenever it attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. But if you control 4 or more creatures, it gets +2/+2 and gains indestructible until the end of turn instead. So this feels like it's going to be akin to like Pauper's Strangleroot Geist in like the mono green stompy type decks, which have been definitely on the lower end of the popularity scale lately, but have kind of stayed on the fringe a little bit. Things like Young Wolf into Bayougroth, Savage Swipe, the Skargan Pit Fighter, Sylvana Ledgewalker, Rancor type decks with like BTE. This feels like it lines up with BTE very, very well. So for instance, you could run out like turn 1 Elf, turn 2 BTE into this, and then turn 3 a creature before combat, and then you attack. And you could very reasonably like attack for 7-ish in that case on turn 3. And that definitely feels like, a reasonable amount of pressure that deck can be applying. If you've got this online, Rancor makes this you're attacking with like a 6/3 indestructible trampler. I mean, you're putting a lot of pressure on the opponent there. I definitely think that this card could be the kind of the missing piece to Mono Green Stompy. If it comes back, I fully expect this card to be in it. So, Josh, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, 4 creatures is usually pretty difficult. So I'm not going to look at it as the big indestructible portion of it. Having a 2/2 that swings for 3, it kind of follows in the same line as the last card we looked at. I think 3 is a much more reasonable number to expect to be able to close a game out with, right? I mean, you go from a 10-turn clock to a 7, and that's with no other support. So there's actually pretty measurable difference between them. I don't think this card's going to end the game on its own, but it will oftentimes put enough pressure on someone to make them use a kill spell on it, or to maybe not attack you that one time. So
worth noting, this does still die to end the festivities, so there is certainly a trade-off there, right? It's just a 2/1 while it's on defense, but I think that getting to 4 specifically in the mono green Stompy deck might not be too difficult. The deck is very creature oriented already. And it does run things like Young Wolf. And while Biograph is kind of a nombo in there, maybe this goes in the Biograph slot. And you kind of deny yourself those super snowbally starts, but the BTE factor really does kind of come into play there. So you can really kind of cash in multiple creatures on turn 2 on curve. And Young Wolf is a resilient threat, right? So it's going to take two deaths to get rid of. I think 4 is definitely the upper end of what that deck wants to present on a board, without risking like a Breath Weapon or a Crypt Rats or something blowing you out. But if you can curve into, some sort of Saprolings or Elf tokens or really just anything that, maybe you run like Eldrazi Repurposer on the 3-drop slot in that deck, which gives you 2 creatures from its ability plus itself. So it's, 3 creatures in 1. There's definitely some ways to kind of game this system to hit that 4 breakpoint pretty consistently without overcommitting yourself.
3 creatures in 1 card, right? Not 3 creatures in...
Yeah, 3 creatures in 1 card. It's
okay.
1 on the cast trigger, 1 on the death trigger, and a 3/3 by itself.
Yeah. So it's not going to satisfy the 4 creatures on its own.
By itself, yeah. But I do think that there are definitely enough cards in the green pool right now that are aggressively costed, and resilient enough in either effect or power and toughness that hitting 4 creatures actually doesn't seem like an impossible task on turn 3. And this certainly, if you can curve it out, is definitely attacking pretty heavy. So I like this card. I would expect it to have a slot in Green Stompy if that deck does make a resurgence. Whether or not it does definitely remains to be seen, but I think a 2-drop that turns into a 4/3 indestructible is definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Now, here's a question to you. Do you think it accelerates the clock that the red-green list has enough? Because if you go Arbor Elf and into turn 2 this guy, right, like as your actual worst play, I don't hate that, right?
I don't think that it makes the red-green cut specifically because 2 is kind of the dump stat, right? If you're a barbarian, you dump intelligence. If you're in Gruul Stompy, you dump 2-drops. And the reason is that your entire deck is designed to jump from 1 to 3. So 2-drops are kind of in that awkward mana inefficient place where like it's the worst case scenario in which you go no 1-drop into just a raw land drop into this. And in those draws, I don't think this is going to get you there. I think that a 2/1 for 2 really is not going to be where you want it to be for that. That deck's really kind of coded into the like go 1 into 3 into 4 into 5 into kill you. And this doesn't really lend into that. You want to go wide quickly on like super mana efficient cards. You don't really want to like be throwing the spaghetti monsters at them like in the Gruul Stompy deck. This is way better, I think, lined up next to things like Young Wolf, like Howl of the Night Pack, Biograph, BTE. That type of deck where you're playing these like super low to the ground, low costed creatures that either have multiple lives, multiple bodies attached to them, or just really efficient stats, so that you can try to pressure them out very quickly. I think it'll be interesting to see if this deck does kind of make a resurgence off the back of this card. It, like I said before, it's kind of stayed on the fringes, and it's definitely taken a hit in popularity to Gruul monsters right now. But with Eldrazi Repurposer, I feel like this deck definitely has the tools to have like some Sacrifice Matters cards, some aggressively statted bodies so that the fights and the Savage Bites are hitting correctly. Things like that. And we do have the what is it? The 1 mana search for a basic or creature you control fights a creature you don't control. Like that's a real card in this type of a deck because it serves double duty. In a deck like this that's so low to the ground, you're not really playing a generous Ent ever. So having your spells be modal like that for serve kind of double duty in a deck like this where resources are pretty scarce, and you're definitely having to play very low to the ground, very all-in-y almost, so you don't really have much backup plan because you don't have any card draw built into the deck. Really do wish they'd just downshift Strangle Rootgeist. I think that card would be an absolute all-star in a deck like this. But this has been pretty close to really good. So I'm interested to see if it's any good. I think Pit Fighter plus Ledgewalker are a good 2-drop spot next to Bayou Groff. I think you get this in there. Maybe Repurposer. You need one other 1-drop that kind of like replaces itself with an Eldrazi spawn. You've got Nest Invader already. Rancor. You've got Nest Invader already. So you've definitely got, I think, enough ways to make 4 on turn 3 that this card is worth checking out. But those are really the only 2 cards that we think are going to make at least a potential Pauper Constructed impact from J25. So let's move into some honorable mentions quickly from Jumpstart. First being Helpful Hunter. This is a 1/1 for 2. It's a white and a colorless cat that when it enters, you draw a card. This is basically a functional reprint minus the enchantment text of the dog from, what was it, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty?
Neon Dynasty, yep.
That ETB drew a card. This is the same card. If you're a cat person, maybe you play this one. If you're a dog person, maybe you play that one. Tough to say. It's the same card minus the enchantment subtext. I don't think that subtext is ever actually going to matter in a game. So
that's the hard questions.
Essentially, these are the same card. Next up is Heir Apparent. Now, this one has gotten Twitter all aflutter, and tons of Pauper players are really excited about cards like this. I think this has kind of Slime Against Humanity vibes to me, which is everybody is going to like pre-sale the hell out of them. Everybody's going to be really excited about it, and then nothing's ever going to come of it. Right now, they are pre-selling for $5 each. $9 for a foil. Which is ridiculous. It is worth noting that while this card does cheat the any number of cards named Heir Apparent, it does only count other creatures you control named Heir Apparent. So there are 2 key factors to that. One is other, the other is you control. So if you were in, God forbid, a mirror match of Heir Apparents, you don't benefit from theirs, they don't benefit from yours. And also, the first one that you cast does nothing, which is pretty impactful. You know, if you go turn 2 just a vanilla 2/2, and then turn 3 a vanilla 2/2 that comes with a 1/1, you are not winning many races in Pauper Constructed these days. So I just don't really see it. That being said, I tried to do some building around this card. I tried to do some kind of speculatory building with things like Battle Screech, Guardian's Pledge, Prismatic Strands, those kind of white color matters cards to see what a deck like this looked like. And over several test games over a few days, definitely felt pretty weak, I'll be honest. Maybe Josh, do you have a different opinion here? Are you hopeful for this card at all? What do you think?
Oh no. I mean, the only hopeful part about this is that the price will go down soon, so that no one's going to get tricked into it. I mean, a lot of these cards that say you can play any number of them, they're usually an indication of like just coming out with a whole new archetype on their own, like being able to just play as many as they want. The additional effect is usually enough to win the game. 1/1s that count other creatures you control with this name, they're not it. Like, that's not a strong enough effect. I think that it would need to make one when it comes in, and then another 1/1 for probably every token you control named that token. And then probably only be a 1/1 itself. But that's really the only way I could have seen this.
Yeah, it's pretty underwhelming, I think. Another kind of Hearthstone reference for the overlap between Hearthstone and Magic. This is not Pogo Hopper, okay? This is not nearly as good as Pogo Hopper. This isn't Pogo Hopper. Don't think it is. Don't get confused just because it's a rabbit. Largely, I just don't think this card is fast enough. I think that if you turn the corner with a deck like this and you just slam, 3, your 4th, your 5th one down, you're gonna come up with a board state that is easily overwhelming your opponent, especially in Pauper. But you have to understand, like, it just makes 1/1s, and it's a 2/2, so, like, you're gonna get End the Festivities, you're gonna get Crypt Rats, you're gonna get Crackling Shaman, you're gonna get Breath Weapon, right? Like, all of these deal with this, and Prismatic Strands can only do so much for you, right? So, I think the deck really kind of needs to have some sort of an engine, maybe white-green with something like Lead the Stampede and a ramp engine or something like that, but even then, not 100% sure that this gets it done. I was a huge proponent of Slime Against Humanity. I was super excited about that card. I have tons of them sitting in a box that literally never got used because the deck just doesn't exist. It was it was an archetype that sounded really cool and that had a bunch of promise and everybody was really excited about, and it just never came together. So keep that in mind before you pre-order these cards. You know, a lot of people get excited about this. I think a lot of people see cards like this and it reminds them of Dragon's Approach from Game Nights, and that card kind of skyrocketed in value and popularity. So just because Jimmy played a deck with it, this is not that. All right, this is not that type of effect. And unless some like modern aficionado can tell me that Heir Apparent is going to be played in modern, I do not see a reason to pay $5 a card for this. So don't do it. That's it. The last honorable mention we have for Jumpstart is going to be Elementalist Adept. This is a 2/1 for 2. Colorless and blue, it's a human wizard. It has flash and prowess. Pretty simple card, to be honest. Simple, unassuming, seems reasonable to me. The last time we really cared about prowess and Pauper was Swift Spear. Obviously, that one went down to the Banhammer because it was too strong. But before that, if we rewind just a little bit more, we had Seeker of the Way, which was pretty popular in Boros synthesizer lists right when that archetype was first forming. We haven't really seen a proper threat with prowess since then. Not really sure this one is going to kind of make the deck itself. I think that in a Delver style like Tolarian Terror deck, this doesn't really work, because while you have enough cast of spells to trigger prowess and maximize the value, it's not really what you want to be, right? The deck can't really afford more creatures because it'll affect your Delver flips and it will affect your Mill flips. And in a deck with more creatures, like ninjas or mono blue fairies, something like that, where the flash keyword is super important and you want to be able to, like, you know, play reactively and drop your creatures down, you don't really have the spell count you need to make this card really shine. So I feel like it's a weird, like, kind of in-between corner case where it feels like it should be good in both of those decks, but it's actually going to end up being good in neither of those decks. Josh, I'll pass it off to here. I'll pass it off to you here. What do you think of Adept? Do you think it's gonna make an impact here?
I want it to. I think the card could have some sort of an effect in like, and also in,
yeah, hard agree.
Yeah.
Hard agree.
Mm-hmm.
Those definitely seem like options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, great. So good talk.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving into our actual quick hits for Foundations. This is our first real hit for Foundations. This is a white creature. Do you want to take it, Josh? And then we'll trade off as we go.
Yeah, so our first pick is Heir Apparent. No, it's first one is Hinterland Sanctifier. It is a Soul Sister. Granted, it's another you control enters. So, was it Soul's Attendant?
This is not a sister. It's a rabbit. This is a 1/2 for 1 white. It's a rabbit cleric, and whenever another creature you enters, you gain 1 life. I believe it was Soul Warden.
No, Soul Warden's everyone.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's Soul Attendant then. I don't know, there's a whole bunch of Soul Sisters. The family is really kind of, I mean, we've got sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles even. There's a 1-drop.
Soul Sister's pet.
Yeah, right. This is the it proliferates just as fast as they did.
It populates. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a card that has some merit. It's a 1/2, which is super relevant. Not sure it's better than a 1/1 that becomes a 1/1 flyer, which is pretty much the go-to Soul Sister right now. But card is solid. Excited to see whether or not Soul Sisters or Mono White in general makes a revitalization with this card. I do think that people are going to try to line this card up with Heir Apparent and try to like maximize on the value, but I think it's a bit of a trap. I think that every creature card in the Heir Apparent deck that isn't a Heir Apparent is probably a mistake. Next up is our blue card from the set. This is Refute. This is a instant for 2 blue and a colorless. It says counter target spell, draw a card, then discard a card. This is just cancel with upside. This is just a hard power creep of cancel. Now, why would you play this in Pauper if counterspell exists? And that's a great question. I think that the vast majority of the time you're not going to. But I think there is probably one very specific instance in which this might see some play, and that is in exactly Turbo Fog. Not the black-green Turbo Fog with Crypt Rats, but the old school blue-green, sometimes Teamer version of Turbo Fog. And the case study for that really is in Arcane Denial. Arcane Denial is a counterspell that Turbo Fog has played for many, many seasons, largely due to the fact that you can counter your own spell to draw 3 cards later in the game off of like Weather the Storm, Storm Copies, things like that. This is another counterspell that allows you to loot, which I think in that deck specifically is very valuable because one, you can use the graveyard as a value source for things like Moment's Peace, but also it helps you ditch some of those extra land draws you don't need once you've stabilized to really make sure you keep the value going and you don't like whiff on a couple of draws and get crushed when you run out of fog effects. So this is a really interesting card. I'm not 100% sure this is going to see play, but if it does see play anywhere, I'd expect it to be in Turbo Fog. Maybe as like a 1 or a 2 of in something like a Dimmer Terror deck or a red-blue like Murmuring Mystic type Scred deck. Really just to help you kind of get through that mid-game hump where you've deployed a few resources, but you need to refill and make sure that your hand stays topped off and you've made most of your land drops. So I will say that this has an absolutely sweet extended art variant. Really, really like it. Cool card. Definitely a cool card. Josh, you have any thoughts here before we move it along?
Is it alternate art? I hear me out. Okay. No, I mean the card itself, it seems fine. You know, like I don't see this going anywhere while counterspell exists, unless you specifically need the draw discard functionality of it, which you covered with Turbo Fog. If there's a blue madness as well list, or a madness list that includes blue that comes up again, I think that that'll be. This will be
Yeah,
a key.
green blue madness comes back with this card. Ooh boy, he gets circular logic and this. Now we're talking.
Mhm.
Really interesting card. I feel like they missed a little bit of an opportunity on the flavor text here. Just simply by missing out on the like the obvious owl, like who do you think you are pun or something like that. I think it would have been really like crisp to just lean into that on the flavor text of this card instead of just the generic I said no. But we'll see if it sees some play. I'd be interested to see. I think that it's nice to see cancel with upside. I'm not sure it's good enough in a format where counterspell exists, but I'm interested to give it a try in some decks that maybe run counterspells but want one or two more counterspells, and this might be able to fit in there. Infestation Stage is our next one. Josh, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, Infestation Sage. Now, I know what you're thinking. Black really needs a Doomed Traveler. And you're right, black does need one. So that's where this is coming in. Just being able to have a 1/1 for one, single black, and when it dies, you get a interestingly enough, black and green insect creature token with flying. So you get the token with flying, and it can block the Guardian of the Guild Pact. So, that's nifty.
It might be semi-relevant in some Coggates matchups or something like that, or Boros Gates.
Mm.
Yeah, this is an elf, notably. That is a creature type that matters in Pauper still. Yeah, Doom Traveler is just like a solid card in most situations. I'm not sure this will see Pauper play, but I think that in Mono Black Sacrifice specifically, this card is definitely good. Um, right now they're running like the zombie that makes squirrels and Shambling Ghast and things like that. This probably replaces one of those.
Mm.
But it's simple. It's a 2-for-1. It's just Doom Traveler in black, and I'm all for that. Right? Doom Traveler feels like it should have had a little bit black in it already.
Right. It's like a hybrid white-black or something.
Yeah, exactly, something like that. But
But
maybe
alas,
it's supposed
that
to be
was
a
not the
white
set.
body with a black token or something like that. And this kind of dials in on that with the green black insect
Mhm.
token. But next up is a card that maybe I'm the only one excited for, but I think it's really interesting. So let's take a look at it. This is Crackling Cyclops. This is a 0/4 for 3. 2 and a red for a Cyclops Wizard. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +3/+0. This is Nivix Cyclops without all the added fluff and 2 colors. Kiln Fiend has definitely fallen off in popularity since the Swift Spear ban. We have Festival Crasher, we have Kiln Fiend still, Assault Strobe, that kind of stuff. I think if anything is going to bring that deck back, something like this is what they needed. So for those of you who don't know, Mono Red Kiln Fiend back in the day used to be a red-blue deck using Nivix Cyclops and Kiln Fiend before they got Festival Crasher. Then they got Festival Crasher and then Swift Spear, and the deck slowly became mono red, and it's never really shifted back into red-blue. That deck gets punished excessively by tapped lands. Because it needs red and blue to play Cyclops, if it has a tapped land or stumbles at all in its mana base, it got heavily, heavily punished, which is why the mono red version felt so much better because it was much more consistent. This is just a mono red Cyclops. So if anything is going to kind of revitalize that deck, I think this is probably it. I'd be interested to see what this deck looks like to support a 3-drop creature now that it has Festival Crasher and Kiln Fiend, but I think this will help with density, and notably, since it gets +3/+0 like Kiln Fiend, the math is the same on lethal. So, really interesting card. Josh, do you have any thoughts here before we jump to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, so Kiln Fiend, the list won a lot because of the cheaper creatures that could pretty much always attack. And I don't think 3 mana is really uh, conducive with that. So like it's gonna have to adopt a slower playing style, I think, than
Uh,
the traditional
I
quick
think
speed.
instead of trying to go for like a turn 2, turn 3 kill utilizing Lotus Petals and Simian Spirit Guides, it's probably going to be
Mhm.
more like a turn 3, turn 4 kill.
Yeah.
With some of the impulse draws like Reckless Impulse and things like that, but I could be wrong. They could just lean super heavy into this with Lotus Petals and Simian Spirit Guides and try to just turbo out a creature on turn 1 every game and try to kill you after that. This could lean into that, right? It's difficult but possible. You could play something, I don't know, Rite
Mhm.
of Flames comes to mind, something like that maybe. Um, I don't know. I'm interested to see if this has an impact on that deck. I do think that it has a home in that deck if that deck wants it. I'm just not sure if it can keep up with the rest of the format if it tries to make this play. But it's interesting to see nonetheless. So Mono Red Cyclops, definitely something that deck wants. Just don't know if it can afford a 3-drop. Next up, Josh, what do we got?
Next up is our last one, actually. And this one is it exists. It's a doozy. But well, yeah, and it's sneaky why. This one is Beastkin Ranger. 3 mana, 2 colorless, and a green, right? It has trample, and whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield, this creature gets +1/+0 until the end of turn, and has a 3/3. Good stat lines, very aggressive on it, and it also matches the same cost and power toughness as the one that made a treasure. So, and with vigilance. Yeah, Jewel Thief. And Jewel Thief was a very good card, right? So just good stats. Part that makes this amazing, like hands down the best card, is that it is an elf with
Yeah.
trample.
Yeah, this is an elf with trample that grows without using Timberwatch, so it's very similar to Elvish Vanguard, or not? Yeah, Elvish Vanguard.
Yeah,
Is that
I think
the one
so.
that
I
grows?
think it's Vanguard.
It's very
Yeah.
similar to Elvish Vanguard in that way. Elvish Vanguard grows over time. This one doesn't. It's more of a burst. But 3/3 for 3 with trample that gets buffed without you having to buff it is definitely a threat in that deck. Thinking off the top of my head about a lot of the elf lists, they're running like Lissalana Huntmaster, so this is going to double trigger off of each green card. There's just a lot to like about this card. I'm not sure whether or not it can afford to play 4. That deck is pretty tight as far as Well-Wishers and Timberwatches and all those things already. But 3/3 for 3 with trample that is an elf by itself was already pretty good, and then giving it a +1/+0 whenever a creature enters is definitely something to be aware of, because this is gonna turn elves into just a pretty solid like turn 4 combo finish. With between Elvish Vanguard, Timberwatch, and this, with like Priest of Titania and Lead the Stampedes and stuff, there are gonna be a lot of games that end on turn 4 with this card.
And it's not, the thing is, the X3 part of it is just going to make it so difficult to deal with, like this card specifically. I mean, granted, sure, Timberwatch, right? But you can't, no board wipe kills this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the reason that Timberwatch was okay, right, was that you can bolt the Timberwatch, and you can bolt this, but you can't breath weapon this. You can't end the festivities this. Now, it'll shrink your board. It'll make your Timberwatches less good, but like the fact that this has trample and you can just kind of like elf ball all over and make this card huge to swing with can put a lot of extra pressure on the board, even after a board wipe, right? Because this is going to live. So, yeah, I think the card's just really good in elves, to be honest. I'm not sure it's a 4 of. Like I said, the deck is very tight in terms of like flex slots and where to play. Some of them aren't even running Well-Wishers. They're already down to like 1 Well-Wisher. Some of them are cutting You Meet in the Tavern. Some of them are cutting Distant Melodies. So like we're really getting down to like the nitty gritty in terms of like, what's the phrase?
Tuning.
No. Mass. What's the phrase?
Critical mass.
Critical mass. We're really getting close to like the critical mass of elves in Elf Ball and Pauper. And I'm interested to kind of see where the list lands. I think this will almost certainly be in elves going forward, though. Like this card is very solid.
I get the feeling that 2 is probably the right number because it doesn't draw you more cards.
I agree. I think 2, maybe 3 is the right number. But yeah, I definitely think this is going to have a spot in elves next to like 1, maybe 2 Lissalana Huntmasters, and you're just going to be able to like really commit to the board on that turn 4 after like a Lead the Stampede and just kind of flood out and swing for like 10, 12, 14 sometimes. And if you have a Timberwatch online, you're even better, right? So because this has natural trample. So trample was something that elves in general have always kind of lacked. They just get chump blocked out, and you hope to overwhelm them and like Timberwatch your dude after they declare blockers on whatever is unblocked to kill them. And this does not have that problem. So really excited. I think Foundations overall is a pretty solid set. I'm really excited to see what Standard looks like with Foundations in it. Jumpstart is cool. I think Slimy Piper is a really interesting card for the mono green deck. I think that's interesting. I think maybe Beastkin Ranger can go in that same mono green deck. Trample 3/3 wants you to flood the board. Slimy Piper wants you to have 4 creatures on the board. Maybe there's some synergy there you can play on, but it's really interesting to see some of the new cards coming. Unlike a lot of the previous sets, there's no clear huge winner for this one. I think Beastkin Ranger is probably the best card, but like really it's not super clear. what the best card is that's coming, and yeah, I think we've got probably 5 to 8 like brew worthy or consideration worthy cards coming out of Foundation. So I'm excited to see where they all land and what the format looks like when they're done. But what I am excited to report is that it doesn't look like there's going to be huge sweeping changes. Right? Nothing is a clear standout. Nothing is a huge power outlier. Nothing's going to shift the power dynamic of Pauper wildly. It's just going to slowly kind of creep into certain decks and maybe revitalize some old ones. So I'm excited by that.
Yeah, I definitely think L's got a shot in the arm for this one. So that's probably going to be one that's going to be a little bit more popular.
But they needed the help. So
they absolutely did.
So yeah, this is really exciting. Josh, closing thoughts before we sign off here?
No, not really. Just happy brewing, you know?
All right. Happy brewing, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As usual, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe down below if you want to boost the channel. Go ahead and share this with another Pauper player or repost it on your favorite social media site. All of this helps, and I really appreciate you guys. So thank you so much. Keep an eye out for the Vegas vlog, because I'm going to be putting out a couple of shorts as well as a longer form vlog on an interview that I got to do while I was at MC Vegas, as well as just vlogging kind of the general experience of hanging out in Vegas with some Magic players. So thank you so much for watching. As usual, goodbye forever. We see you next time. Peace.